Hey everybody, I'm your host David Brear and welcome to FinTech Insider On Air episode 18. Damn, we managed to get through 18 of those. This is impressive. Thanks so much for joining us last week. We had a bunch of people live and even more watching this afterwards, so thanks for all of your support on that. As you know, I wasn't around for that, but Sarah Kachansky had a great conversation with Norris Koppel, the CEO of Monese, which was awesome. If you haven't checked that out, check it out over on the YouTube channel. So this week we're going to be talking about next generation banking infrastructure, and I'm joined by somebody who's probably way better qualified than me to actually talk about this. So Andrew Smith, who is the CTO over at Clearbank. How's it going?
Not bad, thanks Dave. Pretty good, thanks.
It's a pretty sunny
Thanks
day.
for having me.
Yeah, no worries. It's a pretty sunny day in London, right? We've got a nice kind of like ice cream vibe going on in London right now.
You're getting a tan on the top. I'm getting a tan on the top.
It is the problem with this haircut, right? So
all the benefit.
It is a little bit. So I guess before we get into this, there's a few stats that we should sort of go through, because I think this is almost, if I'm honest with you, it's the problem that actually we see many of the organizations that we're dealing with sort of facing into. You know, we're looking at huge legacy technology bases, siloed up over so many different CIOs and so many different people over generations of investment. But if you look at some of these stats, back in 2007, so the transition from 2007 to 2018, the percentage of IT staff as a total grew from 12% to 25%, which is pretty impressive. A lot of people out there saying they're going to be technology companies, and maybe this is them believing that and delivering some people. But if you look at the shift there, JP Morgan has a $11.4 billion technology bill this year in terms of what they're doing. And that has grown 5.6% from last year's $10.8 billion cost as well, which is pretty terrifying. So if you look at US banks alone, they're going to spend 670 tons of $100 bills just on managing their IT infrastructure in terms of their just keeping those lights on,
so that's
providing those services.
Right? You're going with maintenance.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's before you even get into the amount of money that's being spent on doing innovative things and trying to add some more stuff to that. So what's going on here? Like, why have banks got into this scenario? Like, what's happened over the last 50, 60 years that suddenly we're sitting on top of all of this infrastructure that's costing all of this money?
Yeah, it's a good question, right? So, Clearbank, we don't have this problem, right? Straight away, let's get that out of there. But essentially, the way it's how you grow. Right? So a lot of people will grow their systems and siloed. You end up with an onion effect, right? So you've got this particular core system, and that does X for you. And it does it well, and you think, actually, I've got this project mentality, I've delivered that, what's the next thing we do? And you may have other teams that are building up a competition with it, and then something new comes along. Let's say it was the internet, right? So the internet comes along, and then the way that you actually have banking as a deliverable, I want to use online banking. How do I deliver that? Well, this is on a mainframe over here, that doesn't quite talk to that, so I'll put some layers and bridges and whatever else you want to term around that, and then I deliver a stack over here that looks like online banking. And then someone says, what about telephone banking? Or someone says, what about mobile banking? And you start growing these silos out. And it's interesting because you have a lot of products within those. Some of those products will be, let's take a mortgage. Your mortgage has been with you for 20 years maybe, or 10 years. So that product, you can't even really migrate it because there'll be distinct, bespoke business rules around that. So how do you do that? Well, actually, I'll spin something up over here, and then I'll spin something up over here. So with a lot of budget, it's just maintaining what you've got. And I wonder sometimes how much of your IP's on legs and has left the building in any case. So it's all well and good saying it's written down, but people who actually know it, who built it, who've worked in it, they're the best people to help you maintain it and migrate. So.
I think that's a really solid point. It's like the acquisition, banking in the 90s, NatWest particularly, they were out there buying things, mergers, acquisitions, they were living the dream, winning this battle really. So having all of these different silos of infrastructure or technology is just sort of part and parcel of, well, we've acquired a credit card company, therefore we've got a credit card system, and we've acquired
and you try and bolt them together, right? So it's all about integrations, but it's that technology platform doesn't play nicely with that one. So the old ComCorba data, how do I actually integrate that? And you think, we would have pulled our hair out, right? But
if we had it, but it's like you say, it's one of those ones that we're in a situation where really, big banks are kind of a victim of their own success. In many instances, not really pushing those integrations and actually being in a situation where either you integrate customers or systems or data fundamentally. many of the really big organizations now are sitting in a place where they've got 40, 50 different siloed systems running over different,
maybe more, right?
and maybe running over all of these different legacy technologies with and actually it's not just a technology problem. If the experience that we've had, it's fundamentally sometimes this is a procurement issue. You've got across those different silos, you've got different contracts from different systems running over different time periods.
And you'll have different elements of your business to say this particular product's perfect for us. We want that, and that system looks like this, but it doesn't actually integrate with anything else that you've got. So you've gone and bought that. You actually deliver it, and it looks like it's a success, but it needs to integrate. And now everybody else across the bank or the business has got to say, "Well, I need to build that, put that together, and add it up."
And for a period of time, this is a system integrator's dream, right? If you're an Accenture, you're a
consultancy dream.
Exactly, because it's like, how do all of these silos now fit together to? And actually, I think this is the dilemma. This is the thing that the big banks are really sort of facing into is, in a world where new challenger banks are kind of coming into this space with infinitely more effective operating costs through the technology that they're deploying. Can the big banks get close to the operating cost of the small banks and have that efficiency in terms of their deliverables? And really, I guess this is what meant if you're a CIO right now of a big bank out there, and this isn't the thing you're scratching your head figuring out, well, what do we do and how do we face into it? We've got physical data centers, we've got multiple striations of different systems, we've got legacy after legacy in terms of this place. What do we do? Like, how do you fix this?
Yeah, so that's are we giving the answer away?
No. Answer
Do we have
the
answer? Yeah. I don't know, there's a number of ways of looking at it, right? So some people actually look at that and say, we need to consolidate what we've got, and you might see some sort of solution where you have all your data from all these different silos, you bring it up in kind of terminology where look at it as a bus, and you have a bus of all this data that comes on, you put it in a data lake, and then you build another system over there on top of that. That is a consultant's dream come true, right? Because I've got to learn this system, learn this system, learn this system, learn this system. Dev guys, you've got to place all these events up onto this bus, well, blah, blah. But the end product is actually quite successful for you. But the cost associated with that is it's not going to be small, right? Especially if you use the bigger companies. So there's a lot of work that goes on, there's a lot of effort there. Another way that we've kind of seen a lot of people looking at is actually almost like cannibalizing your own business. To say, actually, let's take a small product set that we're really good at and then look at how do we actually spin this up in a different way. Maybe we come to guys like yourselves and we say, let's leverage Foundry and we'll spin something up here as this particular vertical. People come to us at Clearbank and say, okay, what can you deliver us? Well, all right, we're delivering you banking as a service, so forget all the infrastructure play, forget all those challenges, right? It's a subscription-based service. Use some APIs, maybe use Foundry on top of it, whatever you want to do, but essentially you build a new stack over here which delivers you an entirely new ecosystem and customer services on top of that. So you've got mobile banking, online banking, but it's coming from the same sort of, it's a distributed system, don't get me wrong, but it's still one singular core. You haven't got multiple silos. And that's playing a completely different game.
I think so, and that's, like I say, there's a fixing the capability problem. And like you say, a data lake and an ESB would allow you to, consolidate pieces through. It would allow you to expose capability externally to your organization. You can, start doing data analytics in a way that you would never be able to have done if you've got all of those
visualize that in new ways.
But I guess, for really bigger banking organizations, it's not just the capability. It's actually, like say, being able to get to the operating cost at that level that you need to. And while for me, I'm like, again, ex geeky end of the geeks, like I love an ESB as much as anybody else does. But being in that situation where you're fighting on really taking 50-60% of that cost out of your back office to really compete in that new battlefield, I really think this is it's a challenge because it's not just a CTO or a CIO problem. You've got your CFO of your bank going to your CTO going, you need to kind of stop spending please stop spending 11.4 billion JP Morgan, what's
and as a CTO, I said I have to spend that, otherwise you might as well turn the lights.
So it's a rock and a hard place, right?
Yeah.
It's like we have to spend this money to keep the lights on. We really have to invest some money to do something different. But fundamentally, you're paralyzed by running the business and as well.
And of that budget, how much do I actually get to spend on innovation? Or let's not even call it innovation, because innovation is something new, right? Let's just call it on trying to bring something that other players already do into the marketplace. Yeah. How do we leverage that? I think the cloud is actually a big mover in this area, because we see it a lot. A lot of smaller businesses or banks and the larger banks are spinning up particular products or particular subsets, and they're looking at, can we do this in the cloud? What does that look like? Yeah. Regulatory-wise, are we comfortable with that? Or and you're starting to leverage that infrastructure on demand, infrastructure as a service, platform as a service. For me, takes it another level. Why? Especially if you're doing proof of concepts, why actually spend all that money on infrastructure and understanding it and the management behind that, and maybe get people in with the skill sets, when if you're looking at a proof of concept, bang, just start using platform as a service. Or more than that, right? We leverage platform as a service a great deal in what we do.
Well, and that's the thing, isn't it? In a world where agile working methodologies is a thing that big organizations want to deploy, if you've got to wait 6 months for some infrastructure to be set up in your data center, then actually your ability to test something small costs you £3 million to put a blade in a data center, which is just crazy. So do you think I sat in when I spoke at a AWS conference recently, actually, and Ricky Knox was in the audience of that one, and I stood up and I was like, look, the argument of whether big banks should be in the cloud is not something that small banks care about. Put your hand up, Ricky, if you ever thought about actually building a data center when you started building your company. And it was like, well, no. And I was like, exactly. Cloud services, today's technology, the architecture that actually is being deployed in companies that are built today is fundamentally different to what was built, what the organizations that we're dealing with was built on at the time. Yeah. So really, it becomes an exercise in religious beliefs to a certain degree. It's not about what's right today. It's about getting from my mum and dad's understanding of morality and what the music they liked to understanding why hip hop's a thing. And really that we're talking about potentially in big organizations like CTOs and CIOs who are on that journey. It's not just a what should be done. It's actually what people know and what they believe. So fundamentally, people believe still. I've had these conversations that secure data centers that they own and that they can control are better than cloud services.
Yeah, but some of that is down to your mindset, right?
Completely.
And how you question certain things. So I often get asked, and it's a question that drives me mad, to be honest with you, and you'll understand why. Right? But I often get asked, you say, okay, if you're in the cloud, what happens if that particular region goes down? They just don't think that you have any disaster recovery for some reason, right? Or they'll go, what happens if Azure goes down, Microsoft Azure? And you think, okay, that's sort of a question, but it's not really a question. Where are you going with that? And you can go through the whole concept of high availability versus disaster recovery. And a lot of questions get asked about that. You say, okay, so what do you mean by high availability and what do you mean by disaster recovery? We can start talking about, well, I've got multiple cabling just for power in my physical data center. And is that disaster recovery or is that high availability? For me, I'm just saying, well, that's high availability because if one cable goes, I had no interruption of services. Anything that's no interruption of service is high availability. The way I try and portray that. So it's not disaster recovery. When you start getting to the cloud, I start talking very much about high availability of services. You've got microservice architecture, your platform's built on. The cloud itself is it's decentralized, it's decoupled. It's got individual availability sets, availability zones, powers, all the things that go with that. So that if you have the typical DR scenario, which is I've lost power to 3 or 4 servers, what does that mean? Nothing. It means nothing to you. So when you start having questions that you pose and say, what happens if Azure goes down or a whole region goes down? And your mindset is, well, disaster, I would lose my data center and just fail over here. But I can't quite do that if the whole of Azure goes down in one lump.
I mean,
it's a hard question to answer.
Yeah, I can remember having different similar conversations with people about, but what happens when the internet goes down, if internet banking is a thing? And I'm like, well, if the internet stops working, we're going to have like completely different, like people will be flipping cars in the street if the internet stops working.
But it does go down, right? So the DNS outage that was a couple of years ago, right? We saw that Facebook got taken down, loads of places got taken down, and people, they weren't flipping cars, but people weren't happy, right?
Yeah.
But you've got to live in a world where you've got some sort of realistic expectations.
Absolutely.
So we all know that my BT broadband or other telco providers broadband might go down, right? Yeah. And if it does, it gets frustrated, but it's back up. You kind of get to some sort of level of understanding. Yeah. What you don't want is it goes down, you have no communications, you don't know what's happening, you're in the dark, and when's it coming back? What's actually happening? Yeah. So it's a little bit about managing that mindset. And internet going down, Azure going down. If you've got those questions in your mind, you're never really going to step up and start saying, I want to take advantage of infrastructure as a service or platform as a service.
Well, and I wonder how much, like you say, is new people now coming into this and bringing in a different mindset and, like you say, a different skill set. Because if you're coming into this this industry from a big technology company, or you're coming in from our CTO Ewan's from Betfair originally, betting industry, your expectations of availability are very different. Your expectations of latency are very different if you've come in from gaming. And actually, is this in a world where Kafka and Kubernetes and all of these things are becoming more of a standard practice, but still sound like they're witchcraft if you're from dealing with mainframes and COBOL? Like, is that a problem? Is technology just a language that banks don't speak today?
Yes and no, right? So you'll find that some people will say there's no innovation in banks, right? I don't always agree with that because it depends who you're talking to within the bank, right? So I think there's a lot of really talented people in banking who understand deep technology, they understand about the cloud, they understand where technology is going, so to speak. Are they in the right position to actually make those sort of decisions? Yeah. Or even if they are, have they got the backing of the wider group, right? So I think just before we started, we jokingly said about no one got fired from buying IBM 20 years ago, whatever it is, right? If I sit there and stand up and say, okay, I want to go in this complete direction over here, which is just off the wall to everybody else, you've got a lot of work to convince your own peers, really, within your own organisation, let alone people maybe the regulators looking in as well. So it gets quite tough.
It does.
I think things like senior managers regime around that as well, that makes you personally accountable to it. As I said, you can't go wrong. You can justify yourself if you bought IBM 20 years ago. If you wouldn't have bought some sort of, I don't know, even Hewlett Packard or whatever it was back then, you did get frowned upon a little bit. So it's a similar thing, right? I think the point you raised with new blood coming in, like Ewan's coming into this sort of environment, and our own journey.
Well, I wouldn't call Ewan new blood.
Yeah,
just in case you're watching Ewan, not quite new blood, but
that was very polite. But even our own journey at Clearbank, right? So I'd never came from a situation where we worked with mainframes or the older tech as such. And when we started off, we said we wanted to be everything in the cloud. So I was very much like, okay, with Nick Ogden, let's build all this in the cloud. We're going to do everything as subscription-based services. Let's reimagine how you actually deliver clearing services, agency banking. Let's reimagine what that all looks like. And let's use the cloud, right? So you've got infrastructure server, platform as a service. Let's build banking as a service. And this is back in 2015. The first stumbling block straight away was to connect to the clearing schemes was you needed physical on-prem infrastructure. And all of a sudden I went out of my comfort zone there because I've been spending the last 2 years, 3 years with the cloud and Azure, AWS, and never really started dealing with the nuts and bolts of a data center. And it's horrible, right? And if you're from that mindset over there, I really struggled to get into that mindset. Right? I've got to actually build out physical kit. I can't just provision extra servers. I've got to go and order it. They're on a boat from Japan or China or wherever it was, and you're waiting for that kit to turn up. Then Dave's turning up with his cable to plug it in from BT, and you get really, really frustrated. Meanwhile, over in the cloud side of things, we're just provision up new resources. I'll spin that up. Okay, that looks quite cool. Let's use that. Let's build that. So that was quite hard. So if you're in the mindset for you're used to that, actually switching that off to just say, actually, I've got virtualization. I'm going to scale all this out using, as you said, Kubernetes or Docker or Service Fabric or those sort of technologies. It's really hard to get into that mindset. So I think you do need new people coming in and say, actually, this is how we did it either in other industries or this is how we do it for X, Y, and Z. Let's just show you how to do that. That's why I think you're starting to see a lot more proof of concepts with the bigger banks. They're running those in parallel. Let's do this over here, or let's spin up something like metal. Let's look at how we actually leverage that infrastructure or that new approach.
So I think for us, I completely agree with that. I think we're in a place where banks can't afford to put all their eggs in one basket. Banks can't afford to just invest in one big transformation and hope that the billion or 14 billion or 11 billion in this instance that it was for JP. But being in a situation where you spend that billion to move the organisation forwards, it's much more becoming to what we were talking about. Actually, technology and in IT infrastructure generally, in terms of like the new wave, is allowing people to make smaller and smaller bets. We're, to your point around the senior managers regime, actually, for me, it's not about, if I was in a situation, I was a CIO or a CTO at a big bank, I'd be wanting to isolate and make as small as possible every physical release that was happening, because if I was, somebody looking at what happened with TSB, I'm like, dude, don't try and flick a switch and everything change overnight. Make the releases you're doing as small as humanly possible, because if there is a problem with one of them and you can roll back, or if there's a problem with your system and you can actually have a real disaster recovery system that actually allows you to pop these things back up without all of the drama, then and I know there are times where that isn't always possible. I've done the 2 a.m., lots of Red Bull, lots of pizzas, flicking a switch, and various companies. And sometimes you have to do that for some heavy lifting. But if I was in those organizations, for me, I'm like, actually, how do you make the risk of all of these systems and the risks of the changes that you're making as small as humanly possible? So that if I cock something up, I'm okay.
But that's really hard to actually do that, right? So we know what Nirvana looks like, okay? We were lucky at Clearbank, we started off with a blank sheet of paper, so we went for very much a loosely coupled system. So if you look at technical domains, let's pick out faster payment connections, right? If you're a more traditional bank, you may have a typical gateway, and then that sits underneath a monolith of some sort, right? How do you actually break that down? You just can't, right? You can't. Whereas we sat there with a blank sheet of paper and everything's broken down, so I can take that component out, I can then iterate it, make it better, I can do whatever I want. I can even throw it away and put something new in. And actually the blast radius around that, if it goes wrong, is really small. It's really small. You still will have incidents. So the challenge then becomes, well, actually, if I'm over here on a big monolith, or the TSB example you got, how do I then move over to here? You do end up with a big switch. But a big switch, to your point, you can still de-risk that. You can still do it in a lot more smaller things. And I think the way to look at that is actually individual products. So that mortgage, for example, that was sold 20 years ago that people are still on because it's such a great product, right? And it might be losing you money, but you can't get rid of it. You're stuck with that. I can't really see how you're going to migrate that. And actually, would you want to migrate it? Because it's probably got some bespoke rules in there, bespoke this, that, and the other. Well, it's you can't just pull.
It's always the saying that with core banking transformation, essentially, it's people spend £100 million up to £1 billion, depending on what you're doing, and then you just migrate all of the same products and all the same customer.
Which is not what you're going to do, right?
Exactly. Where's the benefit really? But I agree with you. I do think organisations are in a rock and a hard place situation, but fundamentally, and actually, I've had,
But sorry, just to say that, so they have got that, but there's starting to be other opportunities out there now, right? So when you start looking at cloud services, as I said, migrate a product, you can really de-risk this. You can actually come. For us, we sit there sometimes and say, look, you can have 2 clearing banks. You don't have to bring everything to us. Just come and bring some of your faster payments transactions through, or some of your activity that you need, or some of the banking as a service products that we provide, which may not even be related to transactions. Come to us and use those, see how we work with that, and actually you can then move little bits of your systems or little bits of your products over to us. There may be a big bang at some point for you, but you can kind of de-risk that as much as possible by gradually moving more and more over.
And that's definitely what we would subscribe to as well. It's actually...
subscribe is the right word, right? Subscription services as opposed to, bang, I've got to go and spend X on a license or X on an implementation.
Completely. And it's doing it slice by slice de-risks that process. And actually allows you to dip your toe in the water and be in a situation where you're not, buying off something that actually you start and then you can't get out of. We've seen many, I think Bank of Ireland and Nordea particularly they're facing into £1 billion, £1 billion bills for what they're doing, but actually are in a situation where they're sort of so far in now they have to continue with that process, which is a scary thing, because ultimately this is there is not a bank on the planet that hasn't uttered the words, we want to be a technology company. And actually, with so much spent and with so little understanding sometimes, it's really hard to see where they're going to get that. But talk more about Clearbank, because I've heard the origin. So I've spent time with Nick, and I've heard because Nick Ogden, who was the founder
he's the founder,
of Clearbank, actually lives about 3 villages away from where I do in Norwich, which is a weird coincidence.
And they are villages, I'm sure.
They literally are. But yeah, give me the spiel. How did Clearbank come around?
How did Clearbank come around? Okay, so it's an interesting story, really. I think Clearbank is Nick Ogden's brainchild, right? I don't think anyone should ever say anything different. He's one of those people who identifies a niche in the market, right? And this is back in, I don't know when he started, 2013, 2014. He was looking at why aren't there any clearing banks out there? Well, there's the 4, but why is there not a 5th? Is there any sort of political reasons behind that, or is it just to do with capital? What are the actual challenges behind it? And I think Nick being Nick, he just went in there and said, I'm going to talk to the FCA, I'm going to talk to the PSA, I'm going to talk to the regulators and say, is there a reason behind this? Because if not, I'll give it a go. I'll put my shoulder behind it. And I got involved towards sometime mid-2015. Mm-hmm. I'll always remember Nick kind of came in and said, I really want to create a bank. And I thought, good idea, Nick. We're doing mobile wallets, we're doing all sorts of things that are a little bit, I don't really get caught up in that. But so no, I don't want to just create a bank. I want to create a clearing bank. And no one's done it for 250 years because I want to reimagine how we actually deliver these services out there. And there's a product out there that we can actually deliver that helps other banks, other fintechs, other building societies, credit unions to sit on top of what we deliver and deliver better customer experiences out there, which means there's ultimately going to be a lot more competition.
Yeah.
So from Nick's point of view, it's all about driving competition. From my point of view, it's all about an exciting journey, right? It was literally starting to say, okay, this is how things look. Let's actually do something completely different than Nick. Take your idea and let's work together and build out this banking as a service concept. Subscription-based banking or subscription-based agency banking, no one was doing that, right? Yeah. And how you deliver that, let's leverage the cloud as much as possible and let's really try and make a difference and maybe create something that looks completely new in the marketplace. Yeah. And that was a great journey, right? So that's 2015, and you go through the whole regulatory piece. Our CEO, Charles McManus, came on board. He really took us by the scruff of the neck and turned us, instead of being a fintech startup, mainly me, right, and turned the rest of us at that point into a real bank, right? So we are a real bank. We don't say we're a technology company first, but we're a technology first bank, if that makes sense. And our whole proposition is about real time, the value add that we can deliver to you, and then de-risking the way they actually work with Clearbank. Yeah. A lot of people will talk to me and say, what's the benefits of APIs in banking? Some people like to think that we don't need that. We can have host to host. We can just send an FTP file or something and say, well, actually, that sounds great, right? But what's that actually the knock-on effect for your end customer? Whether it's a business or whether it's an individual retailer, individual retail customer. Yeah. What's the impact for them? You're giving them a second-class kind of experience. So we say all the benefits of being directly connected to the payment schemes, all the benefits of being a clearer, but without any of the hassle, any of the friction. Yeah. If you can just subscribe to a service, you can subscribe to accounts or ledgers or products or payments as a service, whatever you want. All those things that make up a bank, decoupled and think of those as services, and come to Clearbank, subscribe to those, and use them on a subscription base. Well, it's great because you're in, it hasn't been done for 250 years, but why not, right? And it's gone rather well. I know why not, because it wasn't easy, right? So it is really, really hard. Yeah. It's really hard to do that. The technology behind that. Yeah. So when we integrate with fast payments, backs and chaps, they're not technologies that I would say are today. Yeah. I'm trying to be polite, right? Yeah. But even fast payment, which is actually our newest payment schemes, it's the technology you use there is not leading edge, it's not cutting edge, it's not pleasant to integrate with in terms of if you're going to work that way. We expose a friendly API, a real-time API, right? Just connect to us, use the API. It's JSON, it's RESTful. It's all the nice buzzwords that dev guys can just sit there and spin up against. Yeah. We've had devs spin up and connect to Clearbank and start making payments within hours. You can't do that if you're going to go directly connected to the scheme. And the cost on that means that actually, to your point, what are you actually going to do with infrastructure? Well, if you want to spin out something new and you want to access fast payments, backs and chaps, or any of the other services that we provide, it's just consuming RESTful APIs. Yeah. That's a completely different model, right?
It is.
It's
sign up, get access
different.
to APIs, start using Clearbank, right?
Yeah, and build your proposition on top.
It's good.
That's the way we kind of look at it.
And it's been going rather well as well. Like, over those years, every time I bump into Nick, every time I read a press release, there's great things kind of going out. So it seems you guys weren't just onto a good idea that there's lots of people wanting to use it.
Yeah. There's quite a lot of press release going out. I think I'm not going to say I'm 100% accurate in this, but I think pretty much every Monday for the last 6-7 weeks, I myself have seen our press releases going out and say, okay, there's another name, there's another name. Some of them are big brand names as well, right? And
I mean the remedies with Tide, that's a big sort of move in terms of the opportunities around obviously the SME side of things. So it just seems like you've got a lot of good kind of irons in the fire in this one. And
Tide one's really interesting, right? Because for us that proves very much the model that we wanted to say that. See, Clearbank will never compete with with Tide for customer base. We will never compete with any of our financial institution customers for their end customers. So the remedies thing with Tide was great because it's a proposition between the two of us. They're going to go out, they do what they do best. And this is really where I sit and actually say banking as a service is what it should do. Is they go out and do what they do best, all the things that they can integrate with and the service that they deliver, that's all them, right? And we're there providing them with the more grown up, if that's the right phrase, the services behind that, direct access, the FSCS protection on the accounts, all the things and services that we'll deliver, we deliver that as a partnership.
Very cool.
But, Tide's a great partner of ours, but they're not the only customer that will come to Clearbank, right? That wants to go out and say, I want to differentiate myself in this particular way.
Well, and that's the great thing about platforms like that. It stops banks really getting into the problems that they're in today. Is platforms like yours are continually evolving, continually moving forwards. And really, arguably, this is the problem that the big banks are facing into, is they've left it so long to fix some of these problems. The gap between where they need to be and where they are is so significant.
Yeah, and I've got a big thing about this, right, which is that I have something in my mind I always call fundamentals. And everybody at the bank will now just go, oh, he's talking about fundamentals again, right? But essentially, from my mind, your fundamentals are security, availability, and performance. On those three fundamentals, you always have to be looking to get better. And if you think like that, it means actually most of the things that you do on your components that you build, the software, the services, the products, even if you step away and it's not tech related, will fall under one of those three things, right? And if you used to take your budget and you say, actually, what am I going to try and spend? We want to probably spend about 50-60% on new build, new services, new capabilities. But the other 40% is then looking at there saying, I want to improve and iterate through what we've got right now. Right? So the security, the availability, the performance, let's get that better. Let's tweak it, let's performance tune it, let's make the availability better. Is there anything we can do better on security? And of course, if you think over the course of a 2-3 year period, the tech that we sit on is moving. Right? So we sit very heavily, I think it's very well known, we use Azure for everything. We're pretty much 100% in the cloud apart from the connections to the payment schemes. Microsoft is a completely different beast now to what it was 2 years ago in terms of Azure. In terms of what it was as a whole corporation 5 years ago, it's completely different. All that technology underneath us, that's moving, that's evolving, that's getting better at everything. So we look at that and say, actually, anything that's over 3 years old, in my mind, we've got legacy. In a traditional bank...
So you said 3, not 30.
Yeah, exactly. So in a traditional bank, when you get there, what's legacy to you? Well, when we filled in the back stuff, I got a bunch of questionnaires I didn't understand, had to Google them, and it's because it's mainframe and tape technology, right? I just didn't have a clue.
History lesson, right?
Yeah, it was good. It was good fun, right? My dad knew what it was.
Well, it is fascinating. Like you say, it's, the guys from Microsoft, moving that stuff forward. There's continually evolving these technologies, and I think that's the thing is, technology in banking shouldn't be standing still. This stuff is going to keep evolving, keep moving forwards. Maybe that's probably a good place to leave this. What do you think, Pet? Good to go? All right. On that note, I think that's probably all we've got to actually go through this week. Where can people learn more about you, Andrew? Where about you specifically, and then actually
me specifically. So the usual places, right? LinkedIn and Twitter. It's Andrew Clearbank on Twitter, I think.
Okay. And Clearbank?
Clearbank is actually, it's very clever branding, right? Clear.bank. Nice. That's it. I know co.uk is the .coms. It's just clear.bank and you come straight through to us.
That was a fantastic domain you built there.
I know. That's not me.
All right, on that note, thanks very much for tuning in. If you want more insight like this, but don't want to see my face because I understand the horror that brings, tune into one of the podcasts that we've got. Go over to iTunes, type in FinTech Insider, and they're all there for you available. If you want to suggest some sort of different topic for the next episode, feel free to hit us up on Twitter over on @FinTechInsiders. And last but not least, we're going to be over in Money 2020 in Amsterdam. So if you're going along to that, come say hello. That's all we've got time for. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.